Hello, I'm Chris Haydock, and I'm here at the Wolfram Technology Conference talking about the elephant in the room, and that's the Wolfram Cloud. And I'm giving my little piece of the elephant, which is what the Wolfram Cloud looks like to the kind of ramen noodle developer set. That is those who have some sort of web business which makes enough revenue to buy a pack of ramen noodles every day. Okay, so back in July when I had a lot of idle time, like I'm sure all the rest of you do, and I thought, well, somebody should really say something about the cloud from the perspective of the user. So here I am. Now, okay, so I guess there's been a lot of cloud talk in certainly in the last 2 years. Last year's presentation, the year before. I think the year before, it's fair to say, people were kind of really puzzled about what the cloud was. And last year, you could see some people began to understand what the cloud was. And I think this year we've come to the point where the understanding of the cloud, of the Wolfram cloud, I'm talking about, of course, is beginning to mature a little bit to where you actually talk to people and you have the impression that quite a few people understand what's going on with the cloud. But it's definitely a work in progress, and we're still kind of at the early stages where I think it would be fair to say that the cloud is still kind of like an elephant in the room. There's different people have different viewpoints of different parts of the cloud. And you quickly discover here as I talk that I definitely have my own particular elephant view of what the elephant is, and I'm going to talk about that. And I certainly would encourage anybody as I'm talking about this who has a different impression to chime in and say, okay, well, I see this a little differently. So like I say, I've got a few slides here. They might be, I just gave the notebook over there in the setup room. It may be on the website yet, I'm not sure. If it's not there now, it should be there momentarily. Okay. So how did I kind of develop my perspective on the cloud? I think I just want to give a little background on that. Okay, so a question that comes up is obviously, well, what can I do with the Wolfram Cloud? And there are beginning to be talks about what you can do with the Wolfram Cloud, which are pretty interesting. Just looking on the Wolfram community and looking on Mathematica Stack Exchange, you see also people asking questions, both very simple questions which show that they haven't got a clue what the cloud is or how it works, to questions which show that people have pretty deep understanding of web application frameworks, and they're trying to figure out how to fit in the Wolfram Cloud and the workflows that they're familiar with. So anyway, don't come at it from, well, I guess I come at it from somewhere kind of in between. I don't have a lot of web development experience, but starting 2 years ago, it looked like there could be some really interesting things that could be done with the cloud, and I'd certainly have to say that at that point 2 years ago, I probably a lot of people were kind of naive maybe about what you could do with the cloud and how much work it would take. Because here I am, 2 years later, I've been putting significant time in this, and I'm still really trying to figure out what can I do with the cloud, how to do them. Okay, so and I would say that okay, so how does the cloud okay, so obviously the cloud is something Wolfram Research is building, and obviously the cloud has to generate revenue so you can pay developers to build it. So that explains presumably a lot of what we see about how the cloud is developing, because somebody, you want to have an enterprise cloud where you have enterprise clients who can pay good money to for services in the Wolfram cloud, which can then, finance developing the cloud both as a more, for people who aren't enterprises, like probably a lot of people in this room aren't. Anyway, so see what I want to say here. So, as always, I've worked on all kinds of different computing projects, and of course, there are bugs, right? And so you see a bug, and long experience says that you want to know something about how the system you're using works, in order to fix it. Okay. So let's just stop it. The basic idea in the cloud is this, right? So for decades we've been using the front end, since the beginning of time in Mathematica, and basically that's creating this notebook representation which is like easy to interact with. So with the advancement of web technology, the obvious idea is, well, gee, we don't have to have the front end sitting on our desktop, but we can have like something that looks like a front end sitting in the cloud so that anybody anywhere can access it. And this is like an easy idea to think of, but it's probably a more difficult idea to execute, especially when you get to the point where, if you think about it, like there's this Wolfram development platform, which is this cloud thing which one uses to develop cloud applications. So the level of complexity is something like if 2 decades ago, right when the front end was introduced, people had said, okay, we've got this front end, and maybe we could use it to develop other front ends, because that's sort of analogous to what's happening here. We've got this. Not only is there a way of representing things in the cloud, but there's this Wolfram development platform which allows kind of effectively other people to make other front ends using the Wolfram cloud. So it's kind of inherently more complex. Okay, so we all like to look at code. So I was at John's talk yesterday, and he was gracious enough yesterday to last night after the talk to kind of explain to me enough so I could kind of understand how the little web development thing, which I just want to talk about here briefly as an example. Okay, so oops, this is going to do that to me. Okay, wait a minute. I didn't want to do that. Okay, let me try that again. Actually, let me not go to the website. Let me just say in a few words what the thing is here. So when you go to the GitHub site, which John directed to us yesterday, you'll see this little icon below here called sort of View Notebooks. Actually, when he went there, you saw the icon, but when I went there, I didn't see the icon, apparently because there's some privilege issue. And anyway, so I was looking at this last night, and okay, so I have a theory about how you would change the privileges, but that's based upon, developing a picture of how this whole thing works. There's a cloud, and you start out, you're at the GitHub website, and then there's some URL that sends you to the Wolfram cloud, and that develops an index of notebooks you can look at. And so the icon for those notebooks works, but this icon doesn't work, but they both have the same privilege. But based upon having looked at this, probably what's happening is when this icon shows up on GitHub, it's like going directly to Wolfram Cloud and downloading the image, and it's like finding that it's a private object and it can't download it. Whereas when it goes to the Wolfram Cloud and makes an index page and it displays an icon, the browser is not going directly to Wolfram Cloud to get the icon. There's some JavaScript trickery that's happening where the image is being loaded by JavaScript, and that's probably why the privileges for this icon and the notebook icon are different. But anyway, let me move on here. I belabored that point enough. So a lot of it in response to, again, things I was seeing on the Wolfram community. People would ask, kind of, well, what could you do with the Wolfram cloud? I started, well, obviously the place to do it is, okay, so this has now been out for a year of Arnold's Flavor-Rator thing. So, and there's a whole bunch of other examples. There's Tweet a Program, there's the Wolfram Pi Day. They're all like websites built in the cloud with Wolfram technology. And so, an obvious thing to do when you're going to develop on these websites is, well, you go to these, to go to some of these websites that they're all advertised on the Wolfram community on Stack Exchange, and you look at them to see if they're similar, if they might be similar to something that you're interested in doing. So that's exactly what I did, and for whatever reason, okay, I guess because I'm kind of like interested in code and stuff, I started looking deeper, and I started wondering, well, what can I do? What can I learn about? Okay, so for instance, Flavor-Rator uses form function, okay? And so when you go to Flavor-Rator and you get a site that looks like I have just a little small edition here, it's a form function, right? So at least the question naturally occurs to me, and again, this is my little, my view of the elephant here, is like you say, okay, what could I do? Like the Flavor-Rator is just this little kind of application. It doesn't do, it's just like, in terms of what my ambition is to build a website myself, but the Flavor-Rator sits in the context of the Wolfram Cloud, and in particular, it's generated by this engine that makes representations of notebooks. And again, this is one of those things you just have to try. I mean, I'm really not sure, even at this point, how successful or how fruitful this line of inquiry is, but you can say, okay, what can I learn about the engine sitting back here in the cloud and about cloud technology that might give me a clue about how to develop cloud websites by looking at the HTML and style script, and more importantly, the JavaScript that is generating this site. So anyway, some months ago, I spent quite a bit of time, looking at that to see what I could discover. And so anyway, on my to-do list, in all my idle time, is to write a nice Wolfram community post about what I learned by looking at the JavaScript that is downloaded when a form function displays on the web. So obviously, I haven't done that yet, because if I had, I'd just be like directing you to the website instead of doing this talk. But I would like to talk. There are some interesting things you can learn. So, first, obviously, you can go to this web page and you can say show source code, and then voila, there's the source code. It's just this little short page, and it's got pretty standard-looking HTML stuff. And then, down at the bottom, it's downloading some JavaScript. So you can go and you can download the JavaScript. And now, of course, the JavaScript just looks like a horrendous mess. So you have to beautify the JavaScript, and that puts it into lines that you can then read and try to make sense of. And again, again, it's on my to-dos to write like a sensible community post about what I discovered, but I can give you kind of the short answer. So I don't even remember exactly how much. It's somewhere like the JavaScript that does this is somewhere between like 10,000 and 100,000 lines, okay? Enough to discourage the casual observer. But, if you just start searching for, text strings in it, what you can find out is that it's a bunch of packages, and maybe, 10 or 20% of that is probably code that was written at Wolfram Research. And the rest of it is packages like CodeMirror, which is this JavaScript package that enables you to display code and things on a web page. And again, off the top of my head, I'm not going to be able to list all the packages, but you can see like half a dozen packages that were made up of approximately 80 or 90% of this JavaScript, which you can then go on the web and you can read about to find out how they work. And again, you can also look at the 10 or 20% that looks like custom Wolfram Research written code, and you can then guess, okay, here's probably what this is doing. So So anyway, bottom line, okay, I want to leave a few minutes here to talk about this, is that what I learned from doing this is that if at this stage, if you want to build, a more, let's say, ambitious website, or, a kind of, quote, real website, and I think that's kind of borne out by the talks. I haven't had time, because as always happens when you're doing a talk, you're like not having a lot of time to go to talks before your own talk. But I get the impression that some of the successful things that we're starting to hear about are these more hybrid things where they're using these web application frameworks, and then they're somehow figuring out some clever way to use Wolfram language tools within it. And so this hybrid thing is then creating a more interesting real website. Let me see what my next slide is here. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, so this is now part of what I'm talking about here. Right. Good. Timing is working out good here. Okay. So, and I've lost my train of thought here. Just a second. Okay. So anyway, bottom line, it's probably what you want to do is think of some mixture of a web application framework and Wolfram language tools to create your projects now. Okay. So maybe I'll just kind of wrap up here. Well, I put up some questions here. One of the interesting kind of business type ideas I like to think about is there a path from like ramen noodle profitability to like Wolfram enterprise cloud, right? Because a lot of us, we're like in the ramen noodle class. Okay, we're making enough. You've got some online websites and things that are making enough revenue to buy ramen noodles, like a daily supply. And that's like a long way, obviously, from really plugging into the Wolfram enterprise cloud. So I think this is an interesting question, and just again looking from the Wolfram community, different kind of social media where coders and things, people who are developing websites talk. You can see that. I mean, it's not always explicitly stated, but this is kind of a question in the background. Okay, so I briefly want to say okay, first of all, look, I'm sorry. Does anybody have like a question now? Because I don't want to talk to like the very end and not give people an opportunity for questions. I have some more things to talk about intercepting code, but if somebody wants to ask a question, I just want to give people a chance to ask a question.
I'd like to know the quickest way to start trying this out. I do send mail for one thing, and the input type file using URL execute. Is someone around that could demo this downstairs or anything?
Okay, you're talking about the send mail issue. Okay, so there's that link is the Wolfram community post that I did about this. Unfortunately, it is broken with version 11, as far as I know. And I haven't had time to try to figure out, well, I sort of know why, but it's like, in the ideal world, I would have reported a bug and right away somebody at Wolfram Research would have fixed it. But, in the real world, these things take time. And right now, it's probably possible to do this, but you'd have to like dig in and well, okay, actually the code will work as it is. And I think the example will still work because it uses URL fetch, which has now been kind of kicked off the cliff. Okay, it's not going to be the way to do things anymore because there's this better thing. I guess it's URL read, and there's this new thing which looks really cool, which is called HTTP request. So URL read does this HTTP request object, and that all looks really nice, and it's going to be really cool once it all works. But like I said, I don't think it's actually working too well right now. At least that's my impression. That and that second link is actually you can read some comments about whether or not it works. Okay, and you can take them with as big a grain of salt as you like. Because again, this is a work in progress. I'm not sure, but so that. First thing, the Wolfram community post, that will actually work, but you'll have to use the URL fetch, and as far as I know, the URL read doesn't work. And let's see, I have 2 minutes here. Let me just say that, okay, so ideally, like there'd be some Wolfram language thing where, okay, you're trying to do HTTP request, and somehow the Wolfram language looks at can look down at a low enough level into traffic and figure out so you can debug whether your HTTP request works. And I'm sure in principle it's possible to do that, but it seems like right now it's easier to set up a proxy server. Again, in my spare time, sometime I'd like to write a community post about how to set up a proxy server to monitor HTTP traffic. If you're in the business, it's like obvious, and I'm not in the business. It took me some time to figure out how to do it, but it would be nice to have a post, because to actually, again, it's these things, and working with the web, it's more complex. You got the cloud, you've got the desktop, there's communication going between, and it's like, it doesn't work on your laptop there, and you're trying to figure out where it's not working. It's very useful to look at the traffic. So anyway, I have the link there to man-in-the-middle proxy, which is a really good way. And the other nice thing about it is, if you look at the traffic and it doesn't look right, and you can use this proxy server has like an editor in it, so you can tell it, okay, when this piece of traffic comes through and it has it's lacking this little tag or something, you can tell it to edit in the tag, and then it edits, it intercepts a thing, wiggles it around how you told it, and then it sends it on, and therefore that's an easy way to verify that you actually understand what the problem is, that you're experiencing, in your kind of server-to-server communication. So anyway, again, in the ideal world, I would have written a blog post about this, but I haven't yet. But anyway, there are the basic links, and you can figure it out. And certainly anybody who wants to try this, I'd be happy to help them. And in the meantime, before I get to this blog post, I intend to write about it. So anyway, I'll close there and just ask, and thank you. And I just want to also say in concluding that I think I just appreciate you all coming, because I think it shows that there's a lot of people thinking about issues related to this, and just the fact that you showed up, kind of is encouraging that like next year somebody will do version 2.0 of this talk, and it'll be a lot more informative than this kind of version 1.0 that I'm doing right now. Thank you.